Hope you are enjoying my lectures. And today I am going to introduce monetarist interpretation of trade cycle. In my previous lecture, I mentioned the Keynesian's understanding of trade cycles. In that trade cycle, there was internal dynamics. Endogenous variables are responsible for the trade cycle as per as the Keynesian's understanding is concerned. Now, we consider the monetarist concept of trade cycle. According to monetarist view, in the short run, monetary disturbances can exert powerful independent influences on real output. But money has no long run effect on real national output. Money does not have any effect on the real output, on the real GDP in the long run. But in the short run, it is the most powerful independent variable. The relationship between money and income in USA has been thoroughly documented by Friedman and Scholz. They consider that the long run rate of growth of real output and money supply are largely independent. According to their research, money supply has generally continued to increase during less severe recessions. Friedman and Scholz relate fluctuations in the rate of change of money supply to variation in economic activity. The arguments supporting the Friedman position have been the subject of controversy. There is a controversy over the Friedman understanding, particularly relating to whether changes in the money supply primarily depend on national income or occur independently. Whether money supply primarily depends on national income or it is independent variable. There is a question. There is a query. Another issue concerns the timing evidence. Friedman himself recognizes that the timing of a relationship whereby variable X leads variable Y by no means justifies the conclusion that X causes Y. Suppose you have two variables, variable X and variable Y, and there is a relationship that X leads variable Y. But you cannot conclude on the basis of this relationship that X danger causes Y or X has a causal relationship with the Y. In support of this, in support of its contention that money supply changes occur independently of output and produce disturbances in output, Friedman cites three occasions. Friedman himself said that the money supply occurs independently of output. There is no relationship. Money supply is an independent variable. There are three occasions. Those occasions are January to June 1920, October 1931, and July 1936 to January 1937, when the Federal Reserve System deliberately followed a restrictionary policy. This led to a sharp contraction in the money supply to be followed by a severe contraction in industrial output. Now, another economist Kagan, he did PhD under Friedman, and unfortunately he did not receive Nobel Prize. Kagan, the most famous economist, provides further detailed evidence for the USA of the cyclical behavior of the determinants of the money stock. Kagan mentioned some determinants of money stock. He estimates that about half the variation of the money supply about its strength is accounted for by currency money supply ratio. Money supply ratio is a variable, is a factor that contributes to money supply. Okay, that contributes to money supply. He estimates that 1/4 by the reserve ratio. Reserve ratio is another. Reserve ratio is another variable that contributes to the money supply. It contributes 1/4, and he estimates that 1/5 by high powered money. High powered money. Money supply about its strength is accounted for by one one by fifth one by fifth by high powered money. Since high powered money can vary independently of income, high powered money is under the government control. So high powered money can vary independently of income, and currency and reserve ratio can depend on income. Thus money depends on income. Thus money depends on income. This conclusion was made by the Kagan. What is the conclusion? Conclusion is that money depends on income. Now, there is a mechanism. As demand for money increases, demand for money is more than the supply of money, then rate of interest will increase. If a rise in the rate of interest makes currency and reserve ratio decrease, if a rise in the interest rate makes currency and reserve ratio decrease, the money supply will expand. The money supply will expand. Here, have a closer look. Here, the money supply is a endogenous variable. Money supply is a endogenous variable. Here, the direction of causality is from income to money supply. Here, direction of causality is from income to money supply. Therefore, money supply is endogenous variable. Here, endogenous. It is not independent. Okay, it is not independent. Kagan states another mechanism. Apart from the above mentioned mechanism, the Kagan mentioned or states another mechanism, though that mechanism is very weak. An expansion approaches the peak, the currency ratio tends to rise the rate of growth of money supply. As expansion approaches the peak, the currency ratio tends to rise. The rate of growth of money supply falls and checks the growth of output. Once the contraction sets in both ratio, once the contraction sets in, both ratio rise. When there is a contraction, then both the ratio, that is the currency to money supply and reserve ratio, both rise. In this situation, banks wish to strengthen their liquid asset position. Public also experiences similar uncertainties and raise desired currency ratio. It means that banks wish to strengthen their liquid assets as there is a contraction. So there is a less money supply in the economy. At the same time, public out of uncertainties also try to raise desired currency ratio. So in the one hand bank and in the another hand the public, both these factors lower the money supply and strengthen the forces of contraction. And this process is self-generating. Okay? This process is self-generating. When there is a crisis, public again try to hold cash and bank then try to liquid their fixed assets. And in that way, the contraction will persist and the process is self-generating. Okay? Monetary factors can therefore contribute to cyclical disturbances in economic activity. Monetary factors can therefore contribute to cyclical disturbances, business cycle or trade cycle. Therefore, there is a disturbance, there is a cyclical disturbance because of monetary factors. Money can function independently or being related to changes in the national income. But ultimately, monetary factors can therefore contribute to cyclical disturbances. It can be concluded. Okay? It can be concluded that monetary factors are responsible for the cyclical disturbances. It may be independent or it may be endogenous variable. There are two aspects to the Keynesian argument that money is of little importance in influencing economic activity in the short run. What are those aspects? One is, the first aspect is money supply should be determined endogenously by national income. Money supply should be determined endogenously by national income. The mechanism has been mentioned in my previous slide. How money supply becomes an endogenous variable, or how the money supply is determined endogenously by national income. It is mentioned in my previous slide. The national income, the second one is the national income should be unresponsive to changes in the money supply. The national income should be unresponsive to changes in the money supply. How it is possible? How it is possible? It is known to us that money supply multiplied by the velocity of the money is equal to the price level multiplied by the output of that particular year. So if there is a fall in the money supply, if there is a fall in the money supply and there is a change in the velocity, that is if money supply, suppose n falls, then, and on the other hand velocity increases, then there is an adjustment. There is an adjustment. If it falls and it increases, there is no effect on the output. on the national income. So on the basis of that, the changes of velocity, the national income should be unresponsive to changes in the money supply. This type of condition has been emerged in the Keynesian argument. Okay, when there is an increase in money supply, there is a fall in the velocity of money. When there is an increase in money supply, then there is a fall. There is a fall in the velocity. In that way, PV remains constant. Okay, so national income should be unresponsive to changes in the money supply. But Friedman presented different argument, different reasoning here. He said that there is a he said that there is a desired velocity and there is a measured velocity. There is a desired velocity and there is a measured velocity. The usual calculation of velocity, that is the measured velocity, which is current income divided by the stock of money, and desired velocity, which is permanent income divided by the money stock. Desired velocity is equal to the ratio between the permanent income and the money stock. So permanent income is overall constant. So velocity does not change too much. So here is the Friedman argument. Okay. So therefore, what we have understood from this lecture, we understood that as far as the Keynesian thought is concerned, there is a internal variable, that means the internal dynamics. There is endogenous variables such as investment, which is responsible for the cyclical fluctuations in the trade cycle or in the business cycle. But Friedman said that in the short run, money has a role. In the short run, money has a role, and it is a powerful instrument. It has a powerful instrument. So the private sector, as mentioned in the Keynesian understanding, is inherently stable but is subject to monetary shocks brought about by the authorities. Private investment is inherently stable